Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Virtue and Virtuosity. For a while now, I've been wanting to look at some examples of technology adoption going on outside of UK and Europe. And today, I'm really excited that we're going to be looking a little bit into how technology is being used in East Africa. And for this episode, I'm joined by Liz Gupta, who works for BRAC Enterprises Tanzania Limited. Liz, really great to chat to you.
Oh, thank you very much, Stuart. It's great to connect with you again.
Can you tell us a little bit about the organisation you work for at the moment and where you're based?
So I'm currently based in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania and working with BRAC Enterprise Tanzania Limited, which is a entity as part of the BRAC family. And we are currently looking at sort of sustainable low-cost solutions to early childhood development and care here in Dar es Salaam at the moment. And we've been piloting different interventions where we're trying to look at life beyond donor funding. And we've been implementing a couple of different childcare options, which in the UK would sort of be like your preschool and daycare market. And we're trying to look into low cost but scalable solutions to childcare for children here that is play-based learning, building on BRAC's capability and expertise in early childhood development and their learning in other countries. What we're trying to do is develop a model that we can then scale up. What we're trying to pilot at the moment is a franchise model where we work in partnership and collaboration with existing daycare providers, ensuring that we add value in quality and management in that area.
Liz, I really like that. And you're talking a little bit there about looking beyond donor funding, because this is one of the things I wanted to focus on in this podcast a little bit. We've talked to larger charities in the UK. I'm looking in future episodes to talk to organisations that are trying to put in models in place that move beyond charity, so we can look at filling the gaps that large donor organisations have taken up until now, but looking for more effective ways to do that through smaller organizations and through entrepreneurial organizations. Can you just tell us just briefly the organization you're working with?
So one of the sort of areas that we really wanted to make sure that we build into the sort of daycare market was how we use technology. So there's a huge amount of work in how you use school-based management systems to effectively run schools. And so we knew from the outset that this was something that we really wanted to make sure we brought into the design. And we worked with one provider, but they didn't meet the needs that we had because we're not just talking about one daycare, we're talking about scaling up to, over a couple of hundred in the next few years. And how do we gather that data that sort of meets our needs from the sort of very basic of how many children are in the centres, are they male and female, to much more how are we tracking health statistics, how are we checking the quality of education, and how we're using it to sort of manage and improve the efficiencies in the centre. And we sort of spent last year really looking around the market, very much sort of focused on the school-based management systems, but nothing was sort of meeting our needs. And then we were introduced to Tiny Totos, who are working in Kenya and have already developed a sort of franchise model. And we feel as though there was real sort of potential for partnership and collaboration as they expand beyond their country and work with organisations like BRAC Enterprises. And I feel as though they're going to really fit our needs. And there's no need for us to reinvent a wheel that somebody's already spent sort of 8 years developing and finding out all of the niggles of database development, and hopefully we can work together and work out where we can sort of develop something that's really sort of fits our needs.
Thanks, Liz. So let's now cut across to the interview with Jannik. And maybe, Liz, if you can stick around, we'll bring you in towards the end and have a bit more of a chat about that. Thanks. Welcome. Now I'm speaking to Jannik Henrick, who leads Tiny Totos. Jannik, hello.
Hi, Stuart. Thanks for having me.
Jannik, what's your role within Tiny Totos?
So my role in Tiny Totos for the past 2 years has been as the managing director. I came from international consulting and joined Tiny Totos more than 2 years ago, where I've had the pleasure of being the MD, really focused on improving our internal operations and very importantly also scaling our technology platforms in Toto apps, where we have technology that focuses on managing daycares in informal settlements and providing data to the parents for transparency, and a last app that focuses more on our internal operations. At the time right now, I'm working as the head of growth and innovation, and that's in that capacity. I have the pleasure of working with Liz and BETL.
That's great. And I guess first of all, I'm just interested just in the broad picture. So can you tell us a little bit about what Tiny Totos does, the market it operates in, and how you're making it really effective in the way it's working in East Africa?
Yes, of course, thanks. So Tiny Totos essentially helps informal babysitters become profitable childcare entrepreneurs. And we're tapping into the childcare crisis that Africa is facing, but actually a lot of low-income areas across the world is facing. And just in Africa alone, it's estimated that there will be more than 1 billion children by 2055, and 4 out of 5 women will actually become mothers. And right now, one of the things that we're trying to address is that more than 80% of African mothers today, they rely on substandard and unreliable local babysitters for ad hoc care. So this is the informal market that we are addressing. And what we see is that without access to quality care and childcare services, not only will the child fail to reach their full potential, but also the parents, and especially the mothers, who are the key caretakers in a household. And without the ability for the child to develop and to grow in a healthy way, we see that the poor childcare actually keeps women from working and keeps them trapped in poverty throughout life. What our model addresses is through a hybrid model. We look at 4 key areas, and that is a tailored in-person and digital training. It's through peer learning and social networks. We then couple that with technology. So technology as a foundational support to our end-to-end childcare as a business model. And that's the apps that we will talk more about today. And then lastly, we also do provide access to financial products, asset financing, and so on, which we very proudly won a MIT award for last year. So doing a lot of exciting things and really trying to find these babysitters and support them in becoming profitable childcare entrepreneurs. And lastly, our model has evolved, as Liz also pointed out, in trying to leverage some of the learnings that we have gone through. So our model has evolved from a cost-heavy in-person training, with physical network building and a lot of physical oversight, to being a much more tech-enabled network with peer-to-peer training and much stronger monitoring and evaluation support through the technology, which has allowed us, for example, last year to have the largest amount of growth in our network to more than 450 daycares in our network. So we are expanding at a rapid pace, not only in Kenya, but also into the region, and very excited to also be partnering with Liz and BETL to see how our technology and childcare as a business model can support even more women that are in need.
Can you just tell me, in terms of an organization, what sort of structure are you? Are you a charity? Are you a social impact organization? How do you work in that space?
So we are a social enterprise, and we are based out of Nairobi. And we are establishing ourselves also in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, and then through partners in Tanzania and Uganda.
It sounds like you've got a really good model in terms of you're supporting the entrepreneurs who are trying to both deliver childcare, but also enabling women to go out to work. Can you tell me a little bit about the technology that supports this?
Yes. And I want to just emphasize that the technology alone doesn't solve any problems. It needs to be a part of a larger movement. And that's why you'll hear me refer to childcare as a business, because that also includes training, upskilling, and empowering these incredible women that are taking care of children in the informal settlements. So when we started the journey of pushing more and more technology into our own operation and also into the hands of our daycare managers and even parents, it was due to an understanding that it would be very difficult for Tiny Totos to scale both at the pace that we would want to, but also that our funders required us to. At the same time, getting the information and the data points that we need to ensure that our own intervention model is actually delivering as it should. So what we've seen in the last couple of years as the technology has been evolving is essentially the same challenge that Liz also faced, that looking in the market, has anybody created a technology platform that is simple enough for individuals living in the informal settlements across not only Nairobi, but East Africa in general to leverage, and that doesn't require heavy hardware, so it doesn't require the latest smartphones on the market, and is easy enough for them to use. So we didn't find any technology that actually served the purpose that we have, which is marking attendance of the child. It's marking revenue, so payments of childcare, expenses in the childcare, so that the daycare manager, so that the childcare entrepreneur can actually run a business. So the same way a CFO and a CEO require to understand the revenues and expenses of their business, our daycare managers need to do the same. Additionally, the applications that we've developed for the manager, the mToto app for the manager, also allows them to record sales of other products. That can be nutritional food products, it can be lunch and the porridges in the morning. It can be for attendance, but it can also be if they sell handmade toys, if they braid the hair of the children, or if they give the babies baths and so on. So it really helps them also to diversify their own income, creating a more resilient daycare in an otherwise very volatile environment. What we then saw was all this information is being collected by the managers, which could have a huge interest also for the parents. So to create a stronger ecosystem between parents and the managers, we created an app for the parents to also view information around their spend, their pickup times, and so on from the daycare. So in a similar sense that in the UK, I'm sure there's also technologies for picking up children, for dropping off children, that provides a message to the guardians of that child. We believe that that information is relevant regardless if you are living in the informal settlements of Nairobi or if you're living in London. So that's the approach that we took. And what we are finding is that not only are the managers enjoying the transparency of understanding their own business better when we look at how much money are they making, how much money can they afford, can they even afford to move to a bigger space and have more children, what would the impact on their economy be. The parents are also enjoying the ability to create a trust, because beforehand it would be a handshake agreement that I have paid you 1,000 shillings because that's what I have. A lot of day workers bring their children to our daycares. So if you have 1,000 shillings today, which is let's say it's like $8 or something like that, you pay that to the manager as a credit to bring your child for the next couple of days. But then 3 or 4 days down the line, the manager says, "Oh, you need to pay for it." But actually, you've already paid for it, and then a dispute is created between the parent and the manager. So with the app, you actually have transparency that if I pay Stuart's daycare 1,000 shillings today, then you can see that amount being deducted every time my child attends, and you have a track history so that as a parent, you have transparency to, do I have a credit or potentially even a debt in the daycare? And as the manager, you have an understanding of the credit and debt towards your parents too. So it creates a lot of trust that way through also.
So it sounds to me a little bit like, we know that there are a lot of barriers to entry if you're trying to start a small business. And what you're trying to do is reduce those barriers so that people can easily start their childcare businesses because you want to encourage women to start these businesses because it will give them an income, but it will also enable more children to be looked after and to be looked after well. And you're looking to give them the tools to run that business successfully, and to deliver high quality care and to enable them to successfully communicate with the parents as well and to handle the finances. So it's really sounding like Tiny Totos is attempting to provide a complete process service technology in a box to enable the easy setting up of childcare businesses. Have I understood that more or less correctly?
That's completely correct. And again, to emphasize that our full model covers training from, of course, running your business, but also across, as you're mentioning, early childhood development, nutritional requirements of children, safekeeping of children, communication with parents. We're very focused on what the market calls a two-generational approach. So not only providing a safe environment, a caregiver that can take care of the child and improving the child's life, but also providing additional information to the guardians, to the parents, so that improved childcare extends into the households of the guardians.
I'm also a little bit interested in some of the challenges, because I come from a software background, the challenges of localization. Presumably, if you're delivering this product in a number of different areas, you've got challenges around localization. There are presumably currency issues, there will be language issues.
Yeah, you're so right, Stuart. And I think also coming from a software background, you will appreciate those challenges more than the next person, I'm sure. So yes, we do see some contextualization and localization challenges. You're mentioning language. A way that we've overcome that is essentially every single word in our app is translatable individually. The reason we've done that is it would have been easy if the languages we're using was Spanish and English, because then you can just download a language pack and then you can move on with your life. However, we are working in an environment where the languages are under supported from a technology perspective. So yes, you do have major languages like Kiswahili, but Kiswahili in Tanzania and Kiswahili in Kenya are two different, let's say, branches of Kiswahili. So there are some words that are completely different, but otherwise it's nuanced. Let's put it like that. And the appreciation of Kenyan Kiswahili is not there in Tanzania and vice versa. So we would need to customize the app even within the same language, quote unquote, to the local environment. And take into then the challenge that in Kenya, for example, a majority of people will speak at least three languages. They will speak their tribal language, they will speak Kiswahili, and they will speak English. So if you merge all of those challenges into one pot and say, okay, we will only have, large language packs, English or standardized Kiswahili, then unfortunately we will lose touch and personalization of our applications with the individuals that we're working with in our environments. So therefore, we've broken down our app so that essentially every word can be translated individually. And then you can choose if we have a large group of individuals from the tribe called Kikuyu, then we can ask them to translate that into their own tribal language, and then the app can function in that language. The same we've seen in Amharic in Ethiopia, and we are seeing it now as we are translating it into Tanzanian Kiswahili. Another challenge that that I became aware of last year was the use of a different calendar in Ethiopia to the Gregorian calendar that you and I know, which of course also poses a lot of back-end challenges. If all of a sudden we have to now convert a standardized date into a new date, which they use in Ethiopia, and then we present them with a new challenge that the time of the day is also different in the different regions across East Africa, because they use a different time setting on their watches. So we do face challenges that are maybe unbeknown to a lot of developers and back-end experts who are not in this region. So therefore, we decided, as mentioned, to develop the app ourselves and then take on board those challenges. So everything from currency conversions, which are, of course, fluctuating quite significantly. We have language challenges, calendar challenges. Yeah, so I think those are some of the real major ones that we are seeing. And then there's also a storage challenge. Where do we keep the data? Which cloud provider has secure connections and data platforms that allow us to keep data based on the national requirements? Some countries in the region require the physical cloud servers and databases to be in country. So, which providers actually provide that service? So again, so there are both contextual challenges, but there are also software, hardware challenges that we need to address, which is seen from the view of many, especially European countries, maybe is not something that they're used to.
So a lot of the topic of this podcast so far has been around AI, and some of the things you were talking about there, I'm thinking if I had my latest Google Pixel phone or my latest iPhone, the processing power and some of the software built into those devices allows for a lot of automated translations that uses AI in a variety of different ways. Is that something which is appropriate in this setting?
In few cases, yes, but ultimately we are seeing a huge expansion and adoption of newer technologies in the region. Kenya, for example, I believe is one of the countries with the highest smartphone adoption rates in the world, which is great because we are empowering more and more people on a daily basis. However, the phones that they are using are not the latest Google Pixel phones. So although they do have smartphones, they are still hardware-wise limited smartphones. And add to that the cost of internet is very high, and it's definitely not as strong as we see in most European countries. So yes, the technology is coming, but the availability of the latest and greatest in the informal settlements that we are working in, it will still take time. So therefore, the way we have built the technology is low data requirements, simple phone requirements. So it's all built to cater to an Android platform because the phones that run Android are simply cheaper and more available. And then we always work, on top of Android systems that are at least a couple of years old to accommodate for the lack of computing power in the phones that our typical user has access to.
I'm thinking in some future episode, I'm going to delve a little bit into some of the barriers around AI adoption around the world. I'm finding that really interesting, the cost barriers that you're talking about there, that often people will have cheaper devices, but also one I just never considered about is the availability of data contracts on your mobile phone, and the large quantities of data cost money. And the transferring those large quantities is not something that everyone has the option to do. Can I just move on a little bit into the franchise model, which is where Liz brought us in at the beginning when we were talking a little bit around, you were looking at Tanzania. So this is presumably a model now that you're hoping you can replicate in different places.
Yes, so Tiny Totals is built fundamentally on a franchising model. So we don't own any daycares, we don't own any property, we don't own any managers. We are providing a platform for empowering individuals and a technology platform to not only support the managers but also improve our own M&E capabilities, which essentially allows us to continuously refine our intervention model in the network. So when we talk about a franchising model, what we have essentially done is we've created a best practice requirements list that covers the core elements you need to be trained in, and then additionally looked at everything from which type of safety forms do you need in the daycare, how do you conduct development assessments that are recognized in the global research community, how do you ensure health assessments or growth monitoring assessments are conducted, and so on. So the franchising model enables us to scale and at the same time allows sort of a holistic view on 5 key areas where we collect data and we support, which is covering the quality of childcare. It's covering the business performance. It's covering child impact, user engagement and livelihood improvements. And then lastly, the network itself. So how is the network thriving? So again, the franchising model enables the individual childcare entrepreneur, the individual manager, to run their own business. And what we provide is allowing them to tap into a network-wide tested methodology and technology and access to asset financing to improve their own business capabilities and to scale their own financial situation. And of course, ultimately help the children that are in that daycare improve and in time have a better life.
One of the things I like is throughout this conversation, Jannik, is you've been carefully guiding me to not talk just about the technology. You've been focusing on saying it's the people, it's the process, it's the technology, it's the combination of those three things, which sounds like a good place to bring Liz back in. But first, we're just going to take a short break, and then we're going to hear a little bit more about how that model can be applied in Tanzania. Welcome back. I'm now rejoined by Liz, who's been quietly sitting there listening in on the first half of that interview. I've still got Jannik here, so please do interject, Jannik, because I think it'll be a really good three-way conversation here. Liz, what I'm probably most interested in at this point is we've heard about Tiny Totos and their technology with a wraparound business process and around how they're hoping to franchise that. Can you tell me a little bit how that fits into the context in Tanzania?
No, it's really interesting. And it's probably linked to how Stuart and I actually know each other, which was back at VSO. We turned to Stuart and said, Stuart, we need to track all of our funding for the last 40 years, keeping all of the history of all of our donors together. And we also need to know exactly which report is due when and on which day so we can make sure it's in. And we need to store all that data. Stuart, can you fix that? And that's what we came to you with our problem. And then you had to sort of develop the database around it, and then we tested it. But it was also completely reliant on the information that was put in by the people. And similarly, we've gone to Tiny Totos. Well, we've heard that Tiny Totos have sort of really been tackling the same problem, where we were looking at, we own and operate 4 daycare centres at the moment. We're thinking about scale, and we want to work out how we can manage those centres as best as possible when we're potentially in a capital city and they're, several hundreds of kilometres away. How can we ensure that the processes that will enable one centre in one location, another in another location, to be offering the same services and the same quality? And so with the franchise, it allows us to scale, and it allows the sort of profit pools to sort of stay within the community. So in Tanzania, there's a lot of regulations around daycare centres that are very much sort of based on the physical infrastructure, which are a huge barrier from a cost point of view to enter. So as BRAC Enterprises, we can come in and set those centres up and offer us like a turnkey business for someone to come in, and then we can use the technology to ensure that those centres are being managed to the standards that we expect as our franchisees to operate.
So in terms of how existing childcare is offered and the transition, I'm guessing there's a lot of informal childcare happens, and presumably it's better if you move to more formalized settings where you can have children at early ages developing so as they can then perform better when they're at school age.
Yeah, you're completely right, Stuart. And I think one of the things that we are seeing in the region is that typical childcare, and we in sad terms call it a child bus stop, is essentially if you think about a condominium, if you have a child and you start taking care of that child, now your neighbor has a child and sees that, oh, well, in Stuart's household, Stuart's wife is already taking care of their child, so they might as well also take care of my child, and then I'll pay you, the equivalent of maybe 10 cents or 15 cents for you to take care of that child. And that sort of then grows in the condominium, and all of a sudden, Stuart's wife is now taking care of, anywhere between 8 to 15 children with no to little knowledge, education around what it actually means to take care of not only one child, but multiple children when it comes to safekeeping, when it comes to child brain development, when it comes to nutritional food requirements. So we do unfortunately see in the informal settlements that we show up to these babysitters who are taking care of, 8+ children, and the children are just laying in a dark room wrapped up, and the children are simply understimulated and also have big nutritional needs in order for them to grow and to develop. And this is the reality. And what we see is that addressing the childcare ecosystem as a market similar to any other market, and similar also to how the UK does it by privatizing some of the childcare services, we actually see that even in informal settlements with parents not earning a lot of money, they are willing to pay for improved childcare services because they see the benefits that their children are exposed to. That comes from development of language, counting. It comes from them putting on weight, being much more healthy, being less sick. So a child that's sick is an expensive child. A child that's healthy is an inexpensive child in that sense. So it really, there are so many benefits of improved childcare. And what we're doing is we're trying to find these babysitters and then support them in their growth.
So, Liz, I'm interested in listening to what Jannik's saying there, because I'm trying to relate what's happening in childcare in the early years to education in later years. Is there a link there, do you think?
There's definitely a link that you can, read all of the research that says if you sort of support creative learning at a young age, you create a much more creative mind at a later date. But it's very hard to join the links between what you're doing with a 4-year-old and their sort of educational outcomes when they're 20 years old going to university. But I mean, a lot of studies have been done by sort of education experts to say this is definitely the case. And I think we all know ourselves that the more creative someone's mind is, the sort of better that everybody, the world is. So I would say that definitely there is a link. We're too early in our implementation to be able to prove it directly to our centres. But I think there's a lot of educational research out there that sort of backs up what we're saying in terms of play-based learning and creative learning is really good for the future.
So, but of course, the thing about childcare is even in the UK, we know that childcare is expensive, and trying to ensure that you get good, high quality childcare for children it's not exclusive to an African context. So we can see that across Europe as well. Have you seen any similarities there, Liz?
I think there's huge similarities. I think everybody that has children and they want to go back to work needs to find a safe place for their children to be. And you can work better if you know your child's in a safe environment. And I think that's the same anywhere in the world. And in Tanzania, for many years, you could rely on younger relatives to come into the household and effectively have a nanny service, which in the UK only the really well-off can afford. And what we've seen here is that service is harder to find now because there's less young people in the market, because luckily they're all sort of at school, and so it becomes more expensive. So the daycare industry here is, it's booming. It's a huge market. And what we're trying to do at BTL is ensure that market that's available for lower to middle income families are getting a quality service. And within that quality services is the promoting the sort of creative learning and the play-based learning, making sure that we're meeting the needs of the market. The market is really demanding that it's sort of, that they're getting literacy skills, numeracy skills. And sometimes we're saying, well, actually, the 3-year-old might not need to learn how to read or write just yet. We need to make sure that they're learning number bonds, for example, or different sort of concepts. But from what I've seen from working in the UK and working in Tanzania, that the challenges are the same. It's actually it's quite expensive to offer high quality childcare. You know, salaries are a huge issue. I remember in the UK, every time the minimum wage went up, we would just have a small heart attack because our costs would increase so much for all of our, you know, our childcare providers. And it's the same here in Tanzania in terms of salaries are, you know, are that one of the biggest cost drivers, followed by accommodation, followed by the sort of premise accommodation. And so, yeah, so basically the same challenges I think exist in both markets. And it's also really challenging to operate profitably in both markets and to make sure that you're not running your businesses at loss. I think when I was in the UK, 40% of preschools shut while I was there in the sort of early 2015. I think they had a huge shutdown of preschools.
I found that really interesting as well, because as a parent, and like many people listening to this as parents, we've all been frustrated by both the quality and cost of childcare and how it actually prevents you getting on with your jobs. We all remember from COVID when childcare was taken away, how difficult that was. And so I can see so many similarities in those examples there. Thank you very much, Liz. Thank you very much, Jannik. Jannik, really, really good luck with Tiny Totos. And I hope there's a few people listening to this who might be interested in this example. And is it okay if anyone is interested in hearing more, if they look you up and reach out and get in contact?
Most definitely. And all of our contact details can also be found on our website. I'll make sure to get that shared with you, Stuart.
That's brilliant. I'll stick that in the newsletter. All right. Well, thank you very much, Jannik, and thank you, Liz.
Thank you, Stuart.
Thanks, Stuart.
All right. Thanks. Goodbye.